Welcome to the Every Day is a New Day podcast and live show. The inspirational show about moving forward and choosing to be more of you. Transmuting the self-doubt and stepping into courageously aligned confidence in who you uniquely are. My name is Kim O'Neill. I'm a twice certified transformational confidence coach, Reiki master, best-selling author, and former crime analyst who now helps empathic, heart-centered individuals shatter the noise of self-doubt, find clarity on what self-love really looks like, and the courage to be peacefully grounded in who you've always known you are, from the inside out. Join me for the live shows on Facebook and YouTube, and visit KimO'NeillCoaching.com for more info. Let's get to it. All right, and welcome everybody. Welcome to the Every Day is a New Day show. I have tonight a really special guest. His name is Quan. I didn't even verify your last name. How do I pronounce your last name?
Huynh.
Huynh?
Huynh. Yeah, Huynh is close enough with just a little H in front of it. Huynh.
Okay. Quan Huynh. Quan, I'm so glad that you're here tonight because you have a very unique, inspiring story and one that I believe is going to touch people in all sorts of ways. So before we get into our conversation, I want to go ahead and say hello to our live audience tonight. Let us know where you are connecting from. And of course, as always, as we move through tonight's conversation, if you have questions, let us know down in the chat, and we love to interact with you as much as we can. So let me go ahead and share with you who Quan is. And again, I'm just really excited we have him tonight here. He just launched a new book and everything, so this is really exciting. So Quan Huynh has been described as a mighty warrior, a magician, and a mountain of goodness. He is the post-release program manager for Defy Ventures, a nonprofit helping those with a criminal past transform their lives through the journey of entrepreneurship. After spending 22 years in and out of correctional institutions, Quan was paroled from a life sentence in 2015 and created his first company 6 months later. The following year, he received the Peace Fellowship Award for his work with the Alternatives to Violence Project. And Quan has since been featured in Entrepreneur, spoken at One Less Talk, and of course has appeared on several podcasts. And his book, Sparrow in the Razor Wire, Finding Freedom from Within While Serving a Life Sentence, literally just launched yesterday, which was September 15th, 2020. And for every copy purchased, one copy is donated to someone who is incarcerated. And I'm going to let him tell us more about that. So again, welcome, Quan.
Thank you for having me. Wow, that was a very energetic intro. I love it.
Yes. Well, I again, when I first met Quan, he started telling me his story, and I just remember, I don't know if you remember, and that's really fine, but I just remember hearing his story and like I literally had my jaw. It was one of those moments because you're telling me this like really deep, serious story that you lived, and you weren't there anymore. You were in the transformational phase of that story. You're on to the next phase and you're helping others. And so will you just start out by telling everyone what your story is?
Okay, well, I'll try somewhere, and then if I'm off topic, then just get me back on what you think could bring value for the listeners.
Sure.
Let me see.
Would you like me to pose a question?
Sure, that would probably be helpful for me. Yeah.
Okay. I think the forefront of everyone's mind is what led you to spending 22 years in and out of prison. Tell us about that.
Okay. I was first arrested at the age of 17 for a conspiracy to commit murder and 3 attempted murders. Some of my friends and my brother and I had plotted to get some local kids that went to our continuation high school near us. They were self-proclaimed skinheads, and we were like our own group of friends. And I grew up in Provo, Utah. I came to the United States when I was just a toddler. I experienced, what I've now come to understand as racism. even though those instances were few and far between, because don't get me wrong, like the vast majority of people in Utah were very kind and loving, I did experience racism. So I think I just had this chip on my shoulder when it came to anybody that was racist. And then because by the time, well, I mean, let me backtrack a little bit. I mean, my father gets diagnosed with leukemia when I was 8. Um, we from Utah, we moved out here to California when I was 10, and about a few years after that, when I was 13, he passed away on the day of my first communion. And leading up to it, I remember my mother had said like he's going to die, and I was in denial. I think my younger brother and sister were in denial. And I just told myself, you know what? I'm going to be, he's not going to die because I know on the day of my first communion, when I get to eat the bread, our family was raised Roman Catholic. I'm going to pray for my father, and God is going to grant that wish because, it's not going to happen. Um, the morning of my first communion, which also happened to be Mother's Day, I woke up, went into the bathroom, and my younger sister says, Dad died last night. And I didn't know what to think. I just remember after that somehow believing in my mind that God killed my father just so he wouldn't have to grant my prayer that day. Like somehow that there was something wrong with me. And I would have to say that is where my faith had died at that time. Um, so then that's right before I went into high school. It was the summer right before, yeah, like I think it was like, no, I was still in junior high when he passed away. Then I got out of junior high that summer. Um, None of us ever processed it. After that, I just remember my mom not even talking about my
Wow.
father, nobody ever asking us how we're feeling. And it was just like each of us were, you know, left to just figure it out on our own, which is, I know, like, now I understand. Like, okay, each of us were all grieving, but, or not even grieving yet. It was just, we're just there, and each of us should have seen some therapist or something, but I mean, it totally devastated and wrecked our family. My mom just went to work full time. I think she just went to work. We were, our family was in poverty, we were in welfare, and me and my brother were just set to figure out on our own. So I went into high school, um, started hanging out with other, just trying to make my way in the world. But then by the time I'm a junior in high school, I've been hanging out with a different group of guys that, were already breaking the law. And then by the time I'm 17, that's when our first arrest came when uh, my friends and we ended up, my brother had come to my work. I was working at Subway, and he came to my work and he told me that those skinheads that we had problems with at a local continuation school nearby had called and threatened my family. They called to say they were going to come and kill my mom and my sister. So then I said, okay, let me ask my coworker where they live. So we asked my coworker. She drew a map. She said, oh yeah, I know where he lives, and she drew a map, like main cross streets. I gave it to my brother and my friends, and by that time, I think my one of my friends had gotten a gun a few months before that. I remember we went to a house party, and we were already getting into trouble. We were already getting into fights with other kids, and there was a group that had totally outnumbered us. I think it was like their group of skinhead guys. They totally outnumbered us, but my friend had pulled out the gun, and they all ran. So suddenly there was this huge sense of power. Okay, we have a gun, and people talked about it, and they knew, okay, oh, this Quan and his younger brother Tommy and that group right there, they have a gun. So that day, my friend was there with his gun, and my brother had told me about these skinheads that had threatened to kill my family. And so I said, oh, let's just let me get the map. I go, okay, pick me up after you guys get off work, and we'll shoot them up. And mind you, at this time, we had never shot the gun before. None of us, like, I've held the gun, my brother held the gun. We were just like, oh, this is a gun, and but we don't know what it is. They were supposed to pick me up that night at 10 o'clock after I got off work, but they didn't. I came home that night. My brother was laying in, because him and I shared a room. He was 15. He was laid in bed. He was terrified. And I said, what happened? He goes, oh, they shot we found the skinheads when they shot them. So I guess after they left my work, my brother went to an arcade to play video games with some of my friends. Another guy was there who said he knew where the skinheads lived, where one of the skinheads lived. He took them there, and they ended up going there. My friend walked up to the house, knocked on the door. They opened it, and he ran inside and shot 3 people. Fortunately, they all survived. We were all arrested, including me. They arrested me for the conspiracy because I had asked my coworker for the map, and I was facing what 45 years to life at the time. Never had a run-in with law, but I held this chip on my shoulder like I should have never been arrested. I wasn't there, but yet on the flip side of it, I used it as an excuse. Well, now I have an excuse of why I don't have to excel in life. I don't have to go to college, and I don't have to because this happened. I got screwed over by the American justice system and the world, and this is an extension of, something's wrong with me, and there's no such thing as a God, and I just held on to all these um, distorted beliefs, and just so that it doesn't cast me in that bad light. Okay, there's not that much wrong with me. It's more because I got screwed over by the world and
Right.
everyone around me. So that began a long series of. I ended up getting 7 years to serve in the California Youth Authority.
And how old were you when that first incident happened?
17. I was 17.
Okay.
They gave me 7 years. I ended up doing about 2.5, and over the next 6, 7 years, it was just going in and out. I ended up getting involved with, making some friends in juvenile hall and the county jail and the California Youth Authority. So when I come home, that's who I associated with. Those friends are later what became our gang. And
So you didn't start out in a gang, but the gang
no, it just
developed.
evolved. Yeah, it just
Yeah.
evolved like with just all of us hanging out, and it's just carrying the same. Because inside the jail and inside the youth, the culture of jail and prisons is this is your group, and you protect your group at all costs. So it serves that purpose inside jail, but suddenly we carry those same values to the streets, and yeah. So I became. I would have to say I became more criminally sophisticated, and I became more violent and more cold to the world.
What happened with those feelings about your dad dying?
I had stuffed it into a dark corner and never touched or talked about it until 25 odd years later when I was doing my life sentence. I did not begin to grieve his death until 25 years later at least.
Whoa. Oh, wow. Wow. Um, okay. So then at what point, because here we are today talking about you found freedom from within while you were in prison. At what point, how long had you been in prison when you finally started to do that inner work? And what triggered you
Yeah, I'll
prompted you
share
to
that.
start that?
Sure. So just to backtrack a little bit, I did a couple years. I got out. Then I was more steeped into the gang culture, the gang life. Was arrested, was violated several times after that. The last time I got out was in 1998 for a gun violation. I did 2 years on that. Came out even more angry than before. Um, and then in 1999, I ended up shooting and killing another human being by the name of Min Nguyen in Hollywood. After it was after some of my friends got in a fight at a nightclub. I wasn't even involved with the fight, but a couple months before that, was uh, I was by that time I was actually working at the Gallup organization. They're known for the Gallup polls. This is before the
Okay.
fame of their Strength Finder studies and things like that. And I was their 1998 Interviewer of the Year. I got to do studies on with Microsoft to do the exit interviews for Bill Gates for his employees. I was on the Department of Justice interviews. So I got to do a bunch of really cool studies. and they gave me the 1998 Interview of the Year award and asked me to interview for a management position. So I thought, like, you know what? Finally, for once in my life, things are gonna go right. The world's not going to screw me. Um, and the the interview at Gallup, though, is all personality based. If I'm sure you know about the Strength Finders. So back then they didn't have the book published, but it was that's how they went by
Okay.
with Strength Finders. And they came back a couple months after, and they just told me, Quan, we're sorry, but you are not a fit. And that news totally crushed me. Like I didn't talk about it. I shoved that into another corner, you know, like where shame and everything else was hidden. And I just did what I knew best. I went down to the bar that day. I got drunk. I didn't talk to my girlfriend about it. And within a week and a half, I called to my friends up, hey, let's go to the club. And I brought my gun along. We went up to a club up in Hollywood, and when they got into the fight, um, I I come out and I found out that they had gotten into a fight. So I basically orchestrated following the victims and ambushing them on the freeway, and that's when I
Oh,
shot and killed one man, injured a couple others, and um, a couple months after that was arrested, and they tried me for the death penalty.
okay.
But yeah, by that time I had gotten rid of evidence. I
So,
coached.
well, let's jump into when you were now in prison. So,
Sure.
you how long were you in prison by the time you decided to start taking more responsibility and looking at?
About on the 10th year, it wasn't until like the 10th, 11th year of my life sentence, because they ended up giving me a life sentence, which in the state of California meant no parole. No one had paroled from California as a lifer since 1977. So I basically thought, okay, this is the same as a death sentence. I'm gonna die in here anyway. So I just lived the way I wanted to live in there. Like, okay, I'm gonna die in here. Why do I have to follow these rules? I'm going to still get involved with whatever I want to do. So that went on for about 10, 11 years.
Wow.
Then that around that time is when my younger brother had a daughter, my niece. I saw pictures of her for the first time, like as a baby, and she looked exactly like how I had remembered my brother as a little kid, and it just took me back to my childhood. And I remember looking at the pictures and thinking, damn, like how did I end up like this? Like what's going on? Then my grandfather passes away, my father's father, um, and that also made me think about my own father. And then by that time, I think I was like 36, 37 years old. And I was thinking, how did I end up like this? And contrasting that with my father, who in his, what, 37, 38 years on earth, had done so much good and had made such an impact on the Vietnamese community when we had settled here in the US. And then how did I leave such a path of, you know, pain and death and destruction behind me? So those were all like very sobering reminders. I've also always been a bookworm. So during that time, like, you know, I've always been known to have like 5 or 6 books at my bunk area. I read them all simultaneously, and I just read books. And during that time, I mean, I've always been involved, interested in like business books and entrepreneurship books and things like that. But one book leads me to another, and somehow I stumble on some books on the saints, and particularly stories of saints that had like their own failures in life, but then they come out of it, and then how did they go on to create a legacy? And I became fascinated with it. Um, which then led me to become fascinated with books on meditation and spirituality and mindfulness. And then, so all of these is going on in my head. And it was just one day on a prison yard when I was thinking, and then I told myself, why does prison have to be punishment? Uh, why can't this be a place where I could look to build some type of legacy for myself, even if I'm supposed to die in here? And the thought came back to me like, I can. And just, you know, that small, subtle shift in thinking, it made all the difference in the world, where the sun was just barely coming up over the hills that morning, and I suddenly feel the warmth from the sun. and I looked down in at the individual blades of grass, and I could see the small drops of dew. And up above me in the razor wire, I heard a sparrow chirping. So, and I tell people like it had probably been chirping my whole prison term, but I had never heard it. But that day I heard it, and that day, from that day forth, prison did not feel like punishment to me. It became a place where I could connect with other human beings. Um, it wasn't this cold, harsh, ugly place. It was, I can only describe it as a place that became where there was solace for me. It became a place of tranquil beauty, and it became a place where um, I could just look to remake myself each day. Like I remember waking up each morning with curious wonders at what is going to be in store for me today. What does God have for me today, or um, what's the lesson from the universe today? And it was continual lessons and a continual process of refinement for me in there.
That is, that's wow. That's really wonderful to hear. So at that time, you didn't know that you would be getting out of prison just yet.
No.
So what then, aside from, finding that peace within, was there, you had this business that you developed that 6 months after you got out of prison. Did you just start, the business like right after you got out, or had you started part of it before?
No, well, I used to work in the prison hospital.
Okay.
So I worked there. I got the job there, and my job was to basically, we worked, part of it was the hospital, part of it was the psych ward. So like if the men cut themselves or they go in a psych ward and they put feces on themselves, my job was to go in with the hazmat uniform, and after the officers extract them, I would have to clean the blood or wipe down the cells and totally sanitize it again. Um, and then also because it also was the hospital, so there are people suffering cancer. So I saw, like, I remember one day when I was cleaning one of the cells for the men. It was a man that was dying from cancer, and I just broke down crying. And I realized, what is going on? I realized this is what I had wished I had been able to do for my father, like clean his room and clean his make his bed, and now I was doing it. So I checked in to see a therapist, and that's where I would have to say I began the process of grieving,
Okay.
and finally mourning his death. And then in understanding that, I saw men around me also suffering different types of loss in prison, whether it's not only the loss of a loved one, but the loss of their parents, or the loss of like a wife that's left them, or being uprooted and transferred from one prison to another and losing friendships that they've developed over the years. So yeah, that just became, I saw that and I saw that need, and I just told I put up a syllabus together. I wrote one up and I gave it to the psychologist. I said, can we create this type of group? The psychologist loved it. We started the first group of its kind, and that's when I started seeing I can make an impact in this world, in this little forgotten corner that people have discarded and forgotten about us. I can make an impact on other human beings, and that just became like my mindset. Like, what can I do today to give my small drop of goodness to the world? And it just became that. So I think that's where just that mindset began to be cultivated of how can I build something, or how can I create something. Um, so yeah, then I suddenly went to the parole board in 2015, and that's when the Board of Prison Terms said, we don't feel that you're a threat to society, and that we're gonna you're suitable for parole. And that's when I was released back in November 2015.
Tell us now a little bit more about Defy Ventures and how you're helping others find that same freedom and heal.
Sure. I was actually involved with Defy Ventures while I was still incarcerated. It was a pilot program that just started at Solano before I was paroled. I saw like, oh my God, entrepreneurship, business. I love this. I signed right in. Um, and then I was found suitable. I paroled, so I continued with the program. Um, and that's in no small part, that's how I created my first company, just that mindset of entrepreneurship. And what they say in there, like, where's the opportunity? What are you trying to what opportunity is out there, and what are you going to try to take with it?
Okay.
um, So that's
Like,
how I
what
created
problem
the
are you
first.
going to try to solve?
Yeah, what
Yeah.
problem? What's the problem? What are you solving? So that's how I created my first company, and then Defy Ventures had actually was expanding out here to Southern California, and I was asked, would you be interested in helping us to build out a post-release program for Southern California? And I said yes. And I left. I was working in real estate at the time, also helping to my family had opened a new restaurant, and I was helping to manage it. I walked away from both of those and jumped on board with Defy. So I mean, and for your listeners or your audience, Defy is a nonprofit that helps men and women with criminal histories to transform their lives through the journey of entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship is the carrot that they dangle, but a lot of it is character and personal development, which also tied in with how I wanted to show up in the world and how I wanted to refine myself.
What would you say has been the most challenging of your journey of getting to where you are today?
Before release or after release?
I would say probably for both. So before and after.
Before, the most challenging part was, I would have to say, removing or taking out every thread of like my sense of identity that I had built up over the years that I realized was fake. Like these roles, like, okay, I'm a gang member, I'm a hustler, I am this, I am that, things that I used to describe myself, this narrative that was in my head about me, confronting it, realizing it's fake, and then removing each thread of it. That was probably the most difficult because it came to a place where I had to look myself in the mirror and basically say, like, everything about me, everything about my life up until this point has been fake. It's been here to please or to be recognized or to gain acceptance with others, and I had no true substance as a person. So I think that, but yet.
And I want to say you did have substance, but you didn't know it yet for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think like there was a part of me that was just like, but no sense of identity, no matter how fake, was better. I mean, any sense of identity, no matter how fake, was better than no sense of identity.
Right.
But
so kind of like a death of the ego.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like a deathless self, and just killing off the old to start with the new, and it like basically not even to start with the new, but to go back to that young little boy that I was and rebuilding myself from that, and that's where I had to go back to. That's what I did.
Okay, and what was the most challenging once you got out post-release?
Rebuilding relationships with family members.
Okay.
They saw me as one way going in, and family members, friends, or even just relationships out here is just people only knew me as one way going in, or they knew me as, oh, this guy was in prison, he doesn't know any better. But then realizing, you know what, I had an opportunity all those years in prison to work on myself, to communicate differently, to draw boundaries and have some sense of assertiveness. I saw the same dynamics played out, let's say, for example, between my mother and my sister and my brother, and it's, whoa, I remember this from 16, 20 years ago, and now I'm feeling like the person outside, and I could navigate things differently, or I could speak differently, whereas they probably, they weren't forced to have to examine because they didn't do anything wrong, but it's just this dynamic that they were still playing out over and over all through these years. So yeah, navigating that and rebuilding their trust in me as a person, that was the most challenging, which I did not see coming. I thought like, yeah, finding a job or readjusting to society, or which were also challenging, but yeah, for sure the most difficult was rebuilding relationships with my family.
Let's touch on just forgiveness. What was the forgiveness process like for you, for forgiving yourself, for forgiving anybody else in your world, and then even forgiveness that you received maybe from others? How talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it was during prison. like I said, I'm the consummate bookworm, so when I'm finding about something I like, I just pour myself into it. Um, and I was really fascinated also with books on restorative justice and, um, healing both parties involved, whether the victims and the offenders. So that was a big part of what my readings was, and I liked that. Um, I was involved with this group, the Alternatives to Violence Project, and I was inside one of the I was one of their facilitators, but it was one of these exercises that we were doing called "Who Am I?" And we had like 10 strips of paper, and it says describe yourself, like what what label are you or what role are you? So, write things like son, brother, facilitator things, and on one of the slips I wrote, I had put murderer. And so then we're just going through these 10 slips, and then they let us do a meditation where they ask, okay, look at this slip, read it to yourself. What does this mean about you? And crumble it up and drop it, and just feel yourself not being that, whatever it is. And how do you feel? So I remember when I got to murderer, and I read it, and they told me to crumble it up and drop it. And they said, what does it feel not to be not that label? It was just, I thought I was already free, but then when I'm dropping that, I go, damn, that's still such an arrogant part of me to hold on to this. Like, who am
Wow.
I to say I cannot be forgiven, and how does it serve anybody? How does it serve me to show up in the world? And it was that day when I had decided this is part of my forgiveness, But to be straight, like it wasn't like, okay, that moment I forgave myself. It was more a process of, okay, I am not going to label myself this way anymore. Um, yes, I did commit murder, but I am not a murderer. And then when I describe myself in harsh terms again like that, then I would remind myself, there you go, Quan, you're doing it again. And then just, and be okay with it and forgive myself in that part of it and just let it go. And I think that process of forgiveness for myself made me so much more forgiving of others around me. So when somebody insults me or something else is going on in my life, it's easy to label them. But then when I can remind myself, wait, how can I judge that person when, I have also done one of the most heinous things in the world, and so who am I to even say this about this person? And then it's always a sobering reminder for myself. I turn it back on myself, like what's going on? What does it say about me that I still feel this need to judge or to um, convict others in my mind?
Right. Wow. Well, I know that one of the things you have on your website, and we're going to definitely touch on your book as well that just came out. But one of the things you have on your website is you have a section for prison writings, and I read, I read one of those today, and it's actually the one parole hearing closing statement. And you talk about so much in there, but I love that you've really taken time to go deep and acknowledge what the mother of Min's mother, what she may be thinking or feeling or experiencing. And you really take time to explore this whole situation and the impact of your actions that it sounds like, you're just kind of questioning it because you haven't heard from her. You don't know what she is thinking or feeling, but you really take time to dive deep and explore all of that. And I'm wondering if, since you wrote that, has anything shifted? Have you been able to be in contact with her and communicate with her? Has any healing been able to come between the two of you anyway?
I wish, but no, I sent off a letter to her. I think it was back in like 2010, 2011. I can't remember what year it was, but the Office of Victim Services had sent it back to me,
Okay.
which meant that she wasn't in touch with them. So no, and then part of my parole conditions is to not, I cannot be in contact with any of my victims or their families. So I don't think that would ever happen.
Okay.
But when
But
you're
she never,
asking about,
she never showed up at any of your
she
hearings
did
or
not,
anything, right?
yeah, she did not show up to the hearings or anything. Unfortunately, like yeah, which in its way, a lot of the guys, when I got back that letter, a lot of the guys on the yard had said, "Oh, this is great news. That means you won't be at your hearing. So that means, there's a small chance that you might be able to go home because when a victim's family member shows up, the chances of of finding being found suitable already is hard, but when a victim
Right.
family shows up, it's nearly impossible. And but for me, it just felt no, I that doesn't sit well with me. I wanted her to receive this letter. Um, yeah.
I'm just going to throw it out there. If you could say anything to her today, what would you like to say to her?
I would just tell her that I am absolutely sorry for taking her son's life.
Quan, let's talk now about, the how you're helping, other people who are incarcerated. And you have this new book that just came out to help share your story, and you're also gifting copies of your book to them. Um, tell us more about your book and how you're helping others with it.
Sure. My book is called Sparrow in the Razor Wire, and it's written for men that are doing long or life-term sentences. And I'm sharing with them how did I come to my own sense of freedom years before I was paroled from my life sentence. And yeah, for this week, where we have a promotion where for every book that is sold, every paperback or hardcover book that is sold on Amazon, I am going to match it and donate to someone that is incarcerated.
What's your favorite thing you love to do as a part of Defy Ventures and helping others?
Um, I would probably have to say when someone comes home, the very first phone call when I get to tell them welcome home. And then ask them how I could have them feel supported. Yeah, I think that, like letting them know, but I think for them to know that uh, somebody's here to help support them in their reentry journey. So yeah, that's the best part of my job, I would have to say, is telling them welcome home.
Nice, nice. Well, and Helene has a question here. We've kind of touched on this, but does anything else come up for you when you're asked, what is life like now being out of prison?
Oh, I where do I begin? I know it's been a whirlwind. I mean, I did, I get to work at Defy Ventures where I still making an impact in the world. I have my commercial cleaning company that I run on the side, and I openly want to hire men and women with criminal histories to help them in their reentry process. Um, and now I have this opportunity with this book to hopefully make an impact. Yeah, my life has, when I slow down enough to remind myself, yes, I'm very blessed, I'm very fortunate, and yeah, I couldn't have done it without like an amazing supportive community around me.
Yeah. So I often hear about people who go into prisons and teach classes or give inspirational talks and things like that. And I'm just wondering, do you have any recommendations? I know we've got other people who are interested in giving back to people in prisons as well. And it can kind of seem like one of these things, like, how do you get into that? Do you have any recommendations for someone who'd like to give back and help in prisons?
Yeah, I mean, they can sign up with local organizations that they know are going into prison. If they could, like the Alternatives to Violence Project, those are volunteers that were coming in that helped me work on a lot of like um, my team building skills and facilitating skills that have been invaluable out here in the business setting. Um, they can volunteer to go in with Defy Ventures. If they're business owners or if they are influential people, then they could also say, okay, you know what? I'm open to interviewing men and women with criminal histories and just, find out their story instead of saying, no, I won't I won't. Or if there are people that are in positions of HR or just become advocates and just understand that these are just for the most part, human beings that are coming home that are just hoping that someone will take a chance on them. They've done their time, and yeah, that they would just like someone just to give a chance on them. And you're going to get a very loyal employee.
Quan, we're nearing the end of today's conversation, but I just want to find out, is there one lasting message that you want to leave with our audience today?
Well, I would just, and this is just my opinion solely, but I would just say that I believe every human being is worth salvaging. So just don't write everyone off just because of their worst mistake.
That's beautiful. And I didn't think to say this at the beginning, but as a former crime analyst who used to work in a police department and had to do a lot of research on, crimes and suspects and trends and patterns and all that kind of stuff, the one thing that I tended to spend way more time on when there was time to do this was trying to understand and learn more about a person's past and history and what led to the crime that they convicted. Because to me, it's never just, I'm just going to go and commit this crime today. Mm-hmm. There's always a whole story, a whole sequence of events that led up to it. And so I thank you for being here today to share with us the sequence of events for you that led up to your incident and Min's life and all of that. So just thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I'd love for our audience, whether you're live or on the replay, let us know, how does it help you in knowing the story that leads up to a crime that, like you were just saying, Quan, could be so easy to just define and say, this person is, give a label and kind of leave it at that, and maybe never even consider forgiveness or any other perspective. How does it make a difference in how you view a situation like that, or a person, in understanding, that there's more to a situation than what the confronting situation is? I'd love to get your feedback on that. And, just again, thank you, Quan, for sharing your story today. I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Lastly, where can people go to connect with you and learn more about your work? And of course, your book is on Amazon right now.
Amazon, is on Audible. They can find it on Barnes & Noble. It's called Sparrow in the Razor Wire. They can find me on most of the social media. Everything is at Quan X Huynh. But my last name might be a little bit hard to spell, so it's or if they want to find me on my website, if they just go sparrowintherazorwire.com, it will point straight to my website, which is quanxhuynh.com. But yeah, I think the easier one is just do sparrowintherazorwire.com and it will pop right up.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Quan, for being here today. And thank you to our audience. As always, let us know what you're taking away from today's conversation. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another Rise and Shine, Creating 2020 Vision episode. And I hope you remember that wherever you are today does not have to be where you are tomorrow. Quan, there's one more question I wanted to ask you. I don't ask every guest this. What does every day is a new day mean to you?
Oh, that means every day is a new day to become better, refined, like forgive yourself for whatever you didn't do right in your head yesterday, and you can make yourself a better person the next day. It's a new day, so continue to build. It's just one intentional choice at a time to make yourself a better person.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you for answering that. And that's our show for today. So have an amazing day, everybody. Stay right there, Quan, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.